Hey, it's Kathy. Welcome to our Jane Austen day. Today, we're doing Jane Austen. I will admit, I had a little bit of stress about this because Jane Austen is, arguably the most well-known writer on our list, and I really didn't know anything about her life. So I crammed this morning as if I was cramming for a quiz. And I found a couple of really good YouTube channels that have short, very succinct, very informational details about her life. And, about her writing and stuff too, obviously. So I will put those in the description after the video. I'm not going to play any of those videos during this one, but I am going to read a little bit of Wikipedia today. First, let's make sure that you guys can hear me. Let me just show you. This is Ellie Dashwood. She has a great video that I watched a couple times over about Jane Austen. And then there's one called 5 Minutes, Jane Austen Explained in 5 Minutes. And that's good too. I like those both. So if you just want something quick and to the point, to give you the whole lowdown. I like to try and see a few different opinions so I can sort of piece together different little details, because each one has different little details that are going to, help give you a bigger picture. For instance, in one of them I learned that and I haven't come across this before, but did you know that in the 1700s, sometimes it was like a thing to pass your newborn off to somebody else to raise for a couple years, and then when they got to be toddler, then they would come back and live with you. I didn't know that, and that to me is just something that I had not heard of before. Although I don't know why I haven't heard of that. I'm sure other authors that we've done had a similar experience, but I hadn't heard about it. And also, she wasn't rich. It wasn't like she was, wealthy. She wasn't destitute, but she wasn't wealthy. So, they were like normal working people. Her father was a rector, and he taught boys. And she had a very large family. I think. Some people back then had much larger families probably, but she had total 8 siblings. And her sister, she was the 7th of the 8th born, so she was the second youngest, and her sister Cassandra and her, I don't know where Cassandra was in the lineup, but they were best friends for her whole life. And another thing I didn't know about Jane Austen is she died at 41. And it's not known what she died of. There's speculation that it was Addison disease, which is an adrenal thing, disease, or cancer. But she got sick, and she was sick for a season, and then she died. I think it was around summertime. Anyway, that was kind of surprising. She died at 41 years old, which is really very young. So, okay. I'm just going to check and see if you guys can see me real quick. And hear me. Yeah. And you can. I think. Okay, cool. yeah, so let's go to Wikipedia, shall we? Oh, I took some notes too. So I'm hoping that like this is enjoyable more if I'm not like trying to, you know. Oh my gosh. Check this out. I didn't even turn my light on yet. There we go. Is that better? How did I not turn my light on yet? What's going on here? This piece is from yesterday. We did Frances Ellen Watkins Harper, and I did a phrenology head and a quote by her. And you can check that one out if you would like. Okay, let's go here. Let's see. So I put Jane Austen on this list because she's not a Gothic writer. She wrote one novel that is considered both Gothic as well as a parody of Gothic, Northanger Abbey. And I think that is what makes it unique, is that it was both a parody as well as legitimately Gothic in and of itself as well. So that's kind of cool. I've never read it. I have never read any of her novels, actually. I do know a lot of her writing, though, because I have studied it. I've studied her quotes, because I do quote art, and I have a Pride and Prejudice t-shirt in my shop. I was gonna wear it today, but you know what? I think I'm moving into long sleeve territory now, and it happens very, very quickly. Like, it happens so quick. It's like in the blink of an eye, I need to wear long sleeves. October. That's October for you. So I will read some Jane Wikipedia, and I'm gonna do some self-editing here because this is a lot of information, and we don't need to do it all. Let's look at the contents though, just to like get a brief. Okay, so I mean, I think I've done a pretty good job this morning of internalizing enough of her information that I will be able to whip through this and whip through this contents here and pick out, you know, what's important and stuff. But I'm not like a very linear, like I'll just like throw stuff out. So this is good because I want to at least give you a linear, you know, history here. Okay. Jane was born on December 16th in 1775. She died in 1817 in July. So she was, you know, ill for that summer, and then she died. Okay. She was an English novelist known primarily for her 6 novels, which implicitly interpret, critique, and comment on the English landed gentry, which is basically like landowners' ilk. So I've already clicked on the click-in thing. I've already clicked into landed gentry, so I know this. I did that a little earlier. Largely historical British and Irish social class of landowners who could live entirely from rental income, or at least owned a country estate. So, you know, not like royalty, but people who had land and had money. And comment on the English landed gentry at the end of the 18th century. Austen's plots often explore the dependence of women on marriage for the pursuit of favorable social standing and economic security. Although she is known as a feminist, I just want to stick that in there because I haven't seen any place in any documentation that she was in any way a activist, like outwardly. So I just wanted to put that in there. Her works are implicit critiques of the novels of sensibility of the second half of the... I don't know what novels of sensibility. Let's click in, shall we? The sentimental novel, or the novel of sensibility, is an 18th and 19th century literary genre that presents and celebrates the concept of sentiment, sentimentalism, and sensibility. Hence, Sense and Sensibility, right? I guess she really named that one aptly. Her use of social commentary, realism, wit, and irony have earned her acclaim among critics and scholars. And I skipped this one over here. Her works are implicit critiques of the novels of sensibility of the second half of the 18th century and are part of the transition to the 19th century literary realism. So, just off the top, because I don't know if it's probably mentioned in here. She was... I don't know if she created the technique or if she just popularized it. It was called free indirect discourse. It's a literary technique where the inner thoughts of the characters and the narrator's voice flow freely together. So I'm guessing, before this point, you didn't really get a sense of the whole personality of the person when you were reading a novel, for instance. Like, you didn't get a little of the inner world of the character as much as she provided in her books. Or in the same way, or in the same, prismatic fashion that she was able to write. So, okay. Austen wrote major novels before the age of 22, but she wasn't published until she was 35 years old. The anonymously published Sense and Sensibility, 1811, Pride and Prejudice, 1813, Mansfield Park, 1814, and Emma, 1816, were moderate successes, but they didn't bring her public fame in her lifetime. She was privately known to be the author of these novels, including by notable people such as the Prince Regent. Prince Regent had all of her books in his library. He was a prince. He was a prince. I don't know who else he was, but I did see that in one of the videos I watched. And there's no clicky, so I can't click into Prince Regent here. She wrote 2 other novels, Northanger Abbey and Persuasions, both published posthumously in 1817. But interestingly, I know that at least one of these were one of her first novels that she wrote, and it got rejected. And Pride and Prejudice apparently got rejected too by the first time that she had tried to get them published, they were rejected. So these were published posthumously in 1817 and began another, eventually titled Sanditon, but it was left unfinished on her death. Sanditon is an 1817 unfinished novel by Jane Austen. She began work on the new novel she called The Brothers, later titled Sanditon, and completed 12 chapters before stopping work in mid-March 1817 because of illness. R.W. Chapman first published a transcription of the original transcript in 1925 under the name The Fragment of a Novel Written by Jane Austen. So fascinating. So I guess you can read what there is of it somewhere. I didn't check LibriVox, but I'm sure if you go to LibriVox, you can find some stuff. She also left behind 3 volumes of juvenile writings in manuscript, Lady Susan, and the unfinished novel The Watsons. Okay, since her death, her novels have rarely been out of print. I'm just... Okay, we know all that. Let's go to her early years. There's not a lot of stuff that she left behind, and there's not a whole lot of information about her, actually, which is... I was really surprised because I thought she's one of the most popular writers that we even know of, like of many centuries. And there's really not a lot about her. And I think part of that is because she was not famous when she was alive, or her fame and recognition came later, like before she died. But she still never had money. She wasn't able to cash in on her success, per se, while she was alive. And yeah, so I mean, her legacy is far great. Like, she wasn't well known, like, when she was alive. Okay, she was born in Steventon, Hampshire on December 16th, 1775. Her father was a rector. Just reading through. He added that the newborn infant was a present plaything for Cassie and a future companion. That's her sister Cassandra. So her sister Cassandra was alive before she was. So she was her older sister. And then she didn't get christened until the spring in April, because the winter of 1775 and 1776 was particularly harsh. So I guess she stayed with her mom at that time, in the family home. And then it doesn't say, I haven't seen that on the Wikipedia, but I did hear on one of the videos I watched that she was sent away for a couple years, or a amount of time, until she was old enough to, I don't know. How long did they keep them? How long did people who raised people's kids hold on to them and then until they gave them back? I don't know. Probably 2. I'm thinking maybe like 1.5, 2 years old. Maybe until they're walking. I don't know. That's something to look up, right? It just seems so wild, but Okay. George, her father, served as a rector of the Anglican parishes of Steventon and Deane. The Reverend Austen came from an old and wealthy family of wool merchants. George's branch of the family fell into poverty as each generation of eldest sons received inheritances. So he didn't have money. He and his 2 sisters were orphaned as children and had to be taken in by relatives. In 1745, at the age of 15, George's sister Philadelphia was apprenticed to a milliner. At the age of 16, George entered St. John's College, Oxford, where he most likely met Cassandra Lay. She came from the prominent Lee family. Her father was a rector at All Souls College in Oxford, where she grew up among the gentry. So, she had a little bit of she about her. And he had, backwards she, because he didn't get any inheritance, really. He was poor-ish, right? So he was not destitute, but he was fell into poverty. Okay. Her eldest brother, James, though, her mother's eldest brother, James, inherited a fortune and large estate from his great-aunt Perot, with the only condition that he change his name to Lee Perot. Interesting. Okay, this is interesting. Just as an aside, I'm not gonna go into her parents, but isn't this interesting? George Austen and Cassandra Lee were engaged probably around 1763 when they exchanged miniatures. What is this exchanging miniatures? A portrait miniature is a miniature portrait painting from the Renaissance art, usually executed in gouache, watercolor, or enamel. Tell me about... I want to hear about people giving them to each other. England. Let's see miniatures in, culture. What is this miniature custom? I want to know about miniatures in, this is kind of fascinating, right? Did people give miniatures as, I love you, marry me? Or like, I'm going to date you. Here's my miniature. Interesting, right? Okay, let's back up. Steventon, this is where she was born. Okay, Henry was the first child born in 1771. Let's see, little George. Okay, oh, her brother Henry. He was developmentally disabled, and then the parents sent him away to be fostered. I think fostered probably means to go live in a home, I'm guessing. I don't know. That is what I am guessing. I don't know if she grew up with him. I think that's the only mention I've seen of him, but we'll see. According to the biographer Park Honan, the Austen home had an open, amused, easy, intellectual atmosphere, in which the ideas of those with whom members of the Austen family might disagree politically or socially were considered and discussed. The family relied on the patronage of their kin and hosted visits from numerous family members. The elder Cassandra spent the summer of 1770 in London with George's sister, Philadelphia, and their daughter Eliza, accompanied by his other sister, Mrs. Walter, and her daughter Philly. Philadelphia and Eliza Hancock were, according to Lefay, the bright comets flashing into an otherwise placid solar system of clerical life in rural Hampshire. And the news of their foreign travels and fashionable London life, together with their sudden descents upon the Steventon household in between times, all helped to widen Jane's youthful horizon and influence in her later life and works. So it sounds like she gained a lot of her, reference information and education about worldliness and, characters and their worldliness from her sister's information, from her sister's experience, from her travels. Cassandra Austen's cousin Thomas Lee visited a number of times in the 1770s and 1780s, inviting young Cassie to visit them in Bath in 1781. The first mention of Jane occurs in family documents upon her return. Quote, and almost home they were when they met Jane and Charles, the two little ones of the family, who had to go as far as Newdown to meet the chaise. I don't know what that means. And have the pleasure of riding home in it. Lefay writes, quote unquote, Mr. Austen's predictions for his younger daughter were fully justified. Never were sisters more to each other than Cassandra and Jane. While in a particularly affectionate family, there seems to have been a special link between Cassandra and Edward on one hand, and between Henry and Jane on the other. Okay, so they loved their brothers too. All got along, or most. From 1773 to 1796, George supplemented his income by farming and teaching 3 or 4 boys at a time who boarded at his home. So she had young men at her home, and her father taught them. So there was additional people in the home. He had an annual income of $200, equivalent to $32,000 in 2023, from his 2 livings. This was a very modest income at the time. By comparison, a skilled worker like a blacksmith or a carpenter could make about $100 annually, while the typical annual income of a gentry family was between $1,000 and $5,000. He also rented the 200-acre Cheesedown farm from his benefactor Thomas Knight, which could make a profit of $300, equivalent to $48,000 in 2023, in 1 year. During this period of her life, Jane attended church regularly, socialized with friends and neighbors, and read novels, often of her own composition, aloud to her family and in the evenings. Socializing with the neighbors often meant dancing, either impromptu in someone's home after supper or at the balls held regularly at the assembly rooms in the town hall. Her brother Henry later said that Jane was fond of dancing and excelled in it. Okay, education. This is interesting, because I think she was in and out of school. I don't think she did we'll see. Education. 1783, Austen and her sister Cassandra were sent to Oxford to be educated by Anne Colley, who took them to Southampton later that year. She was 8, looks like. She was born in 1775. This is 1783. That autumn, both girls were sent home after catching typhus, of which Jane nearly died. She was then from then on home educated, until she attended boarding school with her sister from early 1785 at the Reading Abbey Girls' School, ruled by Mrs. La Tournelle. The curriculum probably included French, spelling, needlework, dancing, music, and drama. That sounds like a ball. Although they're missing art. Where's the drawing? The sisters returned home from before December 1786 because the school's fees for the two girls were too high for the Austen family. After 1786, Austen, quote-unquote, never again lived anywhere beyond the bounds of her immediate family environment. Okay, so she was home for like a couple years. And then she was like from 11 to 12. She went to this awesome school where she got to do all these cool things. And then she got removed because they couldn't pay. And then from there on, her education came from reading, guided by her father and brothers, James and Henry. Irene Collins said that Austen, I don't know who Irene Collins is, we can click in and find out. I think she's probably a British historian and writer known for her studies of Napoleon and Jane Austen. Kind of figured that, but I like to know. I like to know these things. Said that Austen used some of the same school books as the boys. Austen apparently had unfettered access both to her father's library and to the library of a friend, Warren Hastings. Together, these collections amounted to a large and varied library. Her father was also tolerant of Austen's sometimes risque experiments in writing, thank God, and provided both sisters with expensive paper and other materials for their writing and drawing. Yay! Thanks, Dad. I'm just going to do that because it's kind of boring to just look at my iPad, right? Private theatricals were an essential part of Austen's education. From her early childhood, the family and friends staged a series of plays in the Rectory barn, including Richard Sheridan's The Rivals, 1775, and David Garrick's Bon Ton. Austen's eldest brother, James, wrote the prologues and epilogues, and she probably joined in these activities, first as a spectator and later as a participant. Most of the plays were comedies, which suggests how Austen's satirical gifts... I'm going to move this a little bit. Like that. Hold on. There we go. I know. We're not really even like using it yet, but I just want to... I don't like want the camera to be like all up in my face. You know what I mean? Because then it's like, well, there's nothing to look at on the screen. You know what I mean? Right now. We're going to draw, but you get me. Okay. Okay, let's see. Where'd we go? Together with these collections amounted to a large and varied library. Her father was also tolerant of Austen's sometimes risque experiments in writing and provided both sisters with expensive paper and other materials for their writing and drawing. Go, Dad! Private theatricals. Okay, let's go back because I know I already read some of this. Austen's eldest brother, James, wrote the prologues and epilogues, and she probably joined in these activities first as a spectator and later as a participant. Most of these plays were comedies, which suggests how Austen's satirical gifts were cultivated. Sure. At the age of 12, she tried her own hand at dramatic writing. She wrote 3 short plays. I'm really glad we read this part. During her teenage years. Okay, that's important to know. And that's stuff I didn't get. These are like the little granular things that I didn't get from the 5-minute videos or 10-minute videos, or, you know what I'm saying, right? Okay, juvenilia. 1787, 1793. So 1787, she was born in 1775. So that's 12. 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay, 12 to probably 18 or something. From at least the time she was age 11, Austen wrote poems and stories to amuse herself and her family. She exaggerated mundane details of daily life and parried common plot devices in stories full of anarchic fantasies of female power, license, illicit behavior, and general high spirits. According to Janet Todd, Austen compiled fair copies of 29 early works from 1787 to 1793 into 3 bound notebooks with 90,000 words, now known as the Juvenilia, named Volume the First, Volume the Second, and Volume the Third. The Juvenilia are often, according to the scholar Richard Jenkins, boisterous and anarchic. He compares them to the work of the 18th century novelist Lawrence Sterne. I wonder if those are available on LibriVox. Let's see. Let's go to LibriVox real quick, as I'm fond of saying, real quick, and just go Jane Austen, and just see what comes up. What do we got here? Country House Comedy. Maybe that's it. Juvenilia! It's on here! Ooh, that's exciting! That's exciting! Oh, friendship's written wrong. I think that's probably somebody who put it in, though. It's not her. Okay, let's go back. That's exciting! Okay, maybe we can listen to some of that when we draw. Or maybe I can just talk my way through a quote. I mean, one or the other, right? Let's see. We're at 10:50 a.m. I started really late today, so let's just keep going. Oh no! Look, 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 look. Among these works is a satirical novel in letters titled Love and Friendship. Sick, which means that it's written wrong. That's how it's written on LibriVox. So if you don't know what LibriVox is, it's a free website where you can listen to public domain writings by people just like you and me who decide that they want to read it, record it, and put it up for everybody to listen to. So it's very cool, and I really like it. And it's a really good resource. So dig in. Also, if you want to listen to Jane by professionals, if you have an Audible account or if you have a Spotify subscription account, they allow for, you get like 15 hours, I think, of audiobook free with your subscription to Spotify every month. And then if you have Audible, there's plenty of if you have Audible Plus, there's plenty of free. And there might even be like just some free stuff on there too. I don't know. I have Audible Plus, but I know that comes with some, things lumped in that you don't have to pay for. So pay extra for, I should say. Juvenilia. Okay, let's go into it. Among these works is a satirical novel in letters titled Love and Friendship, written when aged 14 in 1790, which she mocked popular novels of sensibility. The next year, she wrote The History of England. Okay. Oh, accompanied by, cool, a manuscript of 34 pages accompanied by 13 watercolor miniatures by her sister Cassandra. How fun. Oh my gosh. I love that they did like a little tag team on that. Austen's history parodied popular historical writing, particularly Oliver Goldsmith's History of England. Honan speculates that not long after writing Love and Friendship, Austen decided to write for profit, to make stories her central effort, and that is to become a professional writer. When she was around 18 years old, Austen began to write longer, more sophisticated works. Here we go. In August 1792, we're there, guys, we're there. Age 17, Austen started Catherine or the Bower, which presaged her mature work, especially Northanger Abbey, but was left unfinished until picked up in Lady Susan, which Todd describes as less prefiguring than Catherine. I don't know a lot of what this means. I don't know what prefiguring means, and contextually clues, I don't know. But I'm going to keep going. A year later, because it will probably come together later. A year later, she began but abandoned a short play, later titled Sir Charles Grandison, or The Happy Man, a comedy in 6 acts, which she returned to and completed around 1800. This was a short parody of various school textbook abridgments of Austen's favorite contemporary novel, The History of Sir Charles Grandison, 1753 by Samuel Richardson. Okay, when Austen became an aunt for the first time at age 18, ooh, who had a kid? One of her siblings. She sent her newborn niece, Fanny Catherine Austen Knight, 5 short pieces of the Juvenilia, now known collectively as scraps, purporting to be her opinions and admonitions on the conduct of young women. For Jane Anna Elizabeth Austen, also born in 1893. Hey, Slippa. Hey, I can't read your name. Nice to see you. I'm reading about Jane Austen, and then we're going to do a quote. Where were we? Okay. Her aunt wrote 2 more. Okay, wait. For Jane Anna Elizabeth Austen, also born 1793, her aunt wrote 2 more miscellaneous morsels, dedicating them to Anna on June 2, 1793, convinced that you are seriously attend to them. That if you seriously attend to them, you will derive from them very important instructions with regard to your conduct in life. There is manuscript evidence that Austen continued to work on these pieces as late as 1811, when she was 36, and that her niece and nephew Anna and James Edward Austen made further additions as late as 1814. How fun. Wait, so they were like co-writing stuff, right? Made further additions. No, they weren't co-writing them, but her niece and nephew made additions and changed things up a little bit. Between 1793 and 1795, I mean, that could be footnotes and stuff. I mean, that could be not footnotes. They could be writing in the margins. We don't know. I don't know. Between 1793 and 1795, aged 18 to 20, Austen wrote Lady Susan, a short epistolary novel, which means a novel. We went over this before. It's a novel written as a series of letters between fictional characters of a narrative. I like those types of books. Usually described as her most ambitious and sophisticated early work. It is unlike any of Austen's other works. Austen's biographer, Claire Tomalin, describes the novella's heroine as a sexual predator who uses her intelligence and charm to manipulate, betray, and abuse her lovers, friends, and family. Tomalin writes, told in letters, it is as neatly plotted as a play and as cynical in tone as any of the most outrageous of the Restoration dramatists who may have provided some of her inspiration. It stands alone in Austen's work as a study of an adult woman whose intelligence and force of character are greater than those of anyone she encounters. According to Janet Todd, the model for the title character may have been Eliza de Fwilid, who inspired Austen with stories of her glamorous life and various adventures. Eliza French's husband, who was guillotined in 1794, amidst the French Revolution, she married Jane's brother Henry Austen in 1797. Okay. Ages 20 to 34. When Austen was 20, Tom Lefroy who's a neighbor, visited Steventon, that's where she lived, from September, or maybe it was her town, Steventon. Yeah, that was her town. From December 1795 to January 1796. He had just finished a university degree and was moving to London for training as a barrister. Barrister was a lawyer. Lefroy and Austen would have been introduced at a ball or other neighborhood social gathering, and it is clear from Austen's letters to Cassandra that they spent considerable time together. I am almost afraid to tell you how my Irish friend and I behaved. Imagine to yourself everything most profligate and shocking in the way of dancing and sitting down together. Austen wrote in her first surviving letter to her sister Cassandra that Lefroy was a very gentlemanlike, good-looking, pleasant young man. 5 days later, in another letter, Austen wrote that she expected an offer from her friend and that I shall refuse him, however, unless he promises to give away his white coat. Going on to write, I will confide myself in the future to Mr. Tom Lefroy, for whom I don't give a sixpence and refuse all others. I will confide myself in the future of Mr. Tom Lefroy. The next day, Austen wrote, the day will come on which I flirt my last with Tom Lefroy, and when you receive this, it will be all over. My tears flow as I write this melancholy idea. Okay, it was over. Halpern cautioned, the movie Emma? No, sorry, that's her book. The movie Becoming Jane. I believe, is about her Tom Lefroy relationship, or he's in it. And that movie is Anne Hathaway. And who's the guy? I forget who the guy is, but it's Anne Hathaway. It's Becoming Jane. Halperin cautioned that Austen often satirized popular sentimental romantic fiction in her letters, and some of the statements about Lefroy may have been ironic. However, it is clear that Austen was genuinely attracted to Lefroy, and subsequently none of her other suitors ever quite measured up to him. Lefroy family intervened and sent him away at the end of January. Marriage was impractical, as both Lefroy and Austen must have known. Neither had any money, and he was dependent on a great uncle in Ireland to finance his education and establish his legal career. If Lefroy later visited Hampshire, he was carefully kept away from the Austens. Ooh! And Jane never saw him again. Oh, wow. Ooh. In November 1798, Lefroy was still on Austen's mind as she wrote to her sister. She had tea with one of his relatives, wanted desperately to ask about him, but could not bring herself to raise the subject. Oh, my God. Awful. Okay, where are we here? Early manuscripts. 1796 to 1798. Did I say happy Monday to you guys? Happy Monday. After finishing Lady Susan, Austen began, let's look on LibriVox and see if Lady Susan is here. Lady Susan is on LibriVox if you want to go listen to it. Austen began her first full-length novel, Eleanor and Marianne. Her sister remembered that it was read to the family before 1796 and was told through a series of letters. Without surviving original manuscripts, there's no way to know how much of the original draft survived in the novel, published anonymously in 1811 as Sense and Sensibility. Austen began a second novel, First Impressions, later published as Pride and Prejudice, in 1796. She completed the initial draft in August 1797 at age 21. As with all her novels, Austen read the work aloud to her family as she was working on it, and it became an established favorite. At this time, her father made the first attempt to publish one of her novels. In November 1797, he wrote to Thomas Cadell, an established publisher in London, to ask if he would consider publishing First Impressions. Cadell returned George's letter, marking it declined by return of post. Wow! What a jerk! Jane may have not have known of her father's efforts. Following the completion of First Impressions, Austen returned to Eleanor and Marianne from November 1797 until mid-1798, revised it heavily. She eliminated the epistolary format in favor of third-person narration. Wow, that's a lot of work. She went from letters to third-person narration and produced something close to Sense and Sensibility. Sounds like she rewrote the whole thing. I mean, you know what I mean? That's a lot of work. In 1797, obviously, right? November, she worked on it for half a year. Reworked. In 1797, Austen met her cousin and future sister-in-law, Eliza de Feuillide, a French aristocrat whose first husband, the Comte de Feuillide, had been guillotined, causing her to flee to Britain, where she married Henry Austen. That's her brother. The description of the execution in the Comte de Feuillide, related by his widow, left Austen with an intense horror of the French Revolution that lasted for the rest of her life. During the middle of 1798, 85. Okay, 75. Okay, so she's 23. During the middle of 1798, after finishing revisions of Eleanor and Marianne, remember that's Sense and Sensibility, Austen began writing a third novel while working with the working title Susan, later Northanger Abbey, a satire on the popular Gothic novel. It's widely known that, or thought that the novel was, oh my gosh, what was the one? We did The Author, and it was her most popular novel. Let's double down here. Where is our novel? Is it Anne Radcliffe's? Whose novel was it? Oh my god, I'm forgetting the name of it, but it's in here somewhere. Hold on. Mysteries of Adolfo. Mysteries of Adolfo. By Anne Radcliffe. Satire on the popular Gothic novel, and it's from what I've read, it's based. The satire is based primarily on the Mystery of Adolfo. Austen completed her work about a year later. In early 1803, Henry Austen offered Susan, the book, to Benjamin Crosby, a London publisher, who paid 10 franc for the copyright. Crosby promised early publication and went so far as to advertise the book publicly as being in the press, but did nothing more. The manuscript remained in Crosby's hands, unpublished, until Austen repurchased the copyright from him in 1816. Ugh. Devastating. Stuff like that happens, though, you know? I mean, I don't know about buying copyright. I mean, some artists these days sell it, some don't, but most writers do not. But, you know, unless you're working for somebody else. But, I'm guessing that he didn't plan to publish it under her name. If he bought the copyright, he was purchasing the actual work. He wasn't going to publish the work under her name. Anyway, she bought it back. So, Bath and Southampton. In December 1800, George Austen unexpectedly announced his decision to retire from the ministry, leave Steventon, and move the family to 4 Sydney Place in Bath, Somerset. While retirement and travel were good for the elder Austens, Jane Austen was shocked to be told she was moving 50 miles away from the only home she had ever known. An indication of her state of mind. An indication of her state of mind is her lack of productivity as a writer during the time she lived in Bath. She was able to make some revisions to Susan, and she began and then abandoned a new novel, The Watsons. But there was nothing like the productivity of the years 1795 through 1799. Tomlin suggests this reflects a deep depression disabling her as a writer, but Honan disagrees, arguing Austen wrote or revised her manuscripts throughout her creative life, except for a few months after her father died. It is often claimed that Austen was unhappy in Bath, which caused her to lose interest in writing, but it was just as possible that Austen's social life in Bath prevented her from spending much time writing novels. The critic Robert Irvine argued that if Austen spent more time writing novels when she was in the countryside, it might just have been because she had more spare time as opposed to being more happy in the countryside, as is often argued. Furthermore, Austen frequently both moved and traveled over southern England during this period, which is hardly a conducive environment to writing a long novel. Austen sold the rights to publish Susan to the publisher Crosby and Company, who paid her 10, equivalent to $1,020 in 2023. Crosby and Company advertised Susan but never published it. Well, that wouldn't be good for your company, you know, for your publishing. The years from 1801 to 1804 are something of a blank space for Austen scholars, as Cassandra destroyed all her letters from her sister in this period for unknown reasons. In December 1802, Austen received her only known proposal of marriage. She and her sister visited Althea and Catherine Bigg, old friends who lived near Basingstoke. Their younger brother, Harris Bigg Wither, had recently finished his education at Oxford and was also at home. Bigg Wither proposed and Austen accepted. As described by Caroline Austen, Jane's niece, and Reginald Bigg Wither, a descendant, Harris was not attractive. He was a large, plain-looking man who spoke little, stuttered when he did speak, was aggressive in conversation, and almost completely tactless. However, Austen had known him since both were young, and the marriage offered many practical advantages to Austen and her family. He was the heir to extensive family estates located in the area where the sisters had grown up. With these resources, Austen could provide her parents a comfortable old age, give Cassandra a permanent home, and perhaps assist her brothers in their careers. By the next morning, Austen realized she had made a mistake and withdrew her acceptance. No contemporary letters or diaries describe how Austen felt about this proposal. Irving described Big Wither as somebody who, quote unquote, seems to have been a man very hard to like, let alone love. In 1814, Austen wrote a letter to her niece, Fanny Knight, who had asked for advice about a serious relationship, telling her that, quote unquote, having written so much on one side of the question, I shall now turn around and entreat you not to commit yourself further, and not to think of accepting him unless you really do like him. Anything is to be preferred or endured rather than marrying without affection. So that's what Jane said to her niece. She said, and that is one of her quotes, anything is to be preferred or endured rather than marrying without affection. The scholar Douglas Bush wrote that Austen had a very high ideal, quote, had a very high ideal of love that should unite a husband and wife. All of her heroines, known in proportion to their maturity, the meaning of ardent love. Quote, a possible autobiographical element in Sense and Sensibility occurs when Elinor Dashwood contemplates, quote, the worst and most irredeemable of all evils, a connection for life with an unsuitable man. In 1804, while living in Bath, Austen started but did not complete her novel, The Watsons. The story centers on an invalid and impoverished clergyman and his 4 unmarried daughters. Sutherland describes the novel as a study in the harsh economic realities of dependent women's lives. Honan suggests, and Tomlin agrees, that Austen chose to stop work on the novel after her father died on January 21, 1805, and her personal circumstances resembled those of her characters too closely for her comfort. Well, that makes sense. Her father's relatively sudden death left Jane, Cassandra, and their mother in a precarious financial situation. Edward, James, Henry, and Francis Austen, known as Frank, pledged to make annual contributions to support their mother and sisters. For the next 4 years, the family's living arrangements reflected their financial insecurity. They spent part of the time in rented quarters in Bath before leaving the city in June 1805 for a family visit to Steventon and Godmersham. They moved for the autumn months to the newly fashionable seaside resort of Worthing on the Sussex coast, where they resided at Stanford Cottage. It was here that Austen is thought to have written her fair copy of Lady Susan and added its conclusion. In 1806, the family moved to Southampton, where they shared a house with Frank Austen and his new wife. A large part of this time they spent visiting various branches of the family. So it sounds like they were a little vagabondy, like they were, living with family because family was helping to support them at this time. On April 5, 1809, about 3 months before the family's move to Chawton, Austen wrote an angry letter to Richard Crosby, offering him a new manuscript of Susan, if needed to secure the immediate publication of the novel, and requesting that the return of the original so she could find another publisher. Crosby replied that he had not agreed to publish the book by any particular time or at all, and that Austen could repurchase the manuscript for the $10 he had paid her and find another publisher. She did not have the resources to buy the copyright back at the time, but was able to purchase it in 1816. Okay, so Jane, we've all been here, and even Jane Austen has been in situations where people have taken advantage of her, in a commercial aspect. I mean, how many of us have had similar things like this happen? or been in. I have, as you can probably tell. So I can relate, Jane. I can relate. Ages 34 to 41. Around Chawton, around 1809, early 1809, Austen's brother Edward offered his mother and sisters a more settled life, the use of a large cottage in Chawton village, which was part of the estate around Edward's nearby property, Chawton House. That's nice. Jane, Cassandra, and their mother moved to Chawton Cottage on July 7th, 1809. Life was quieter in Chawton than it had been since the family's move to Bath in 1800. The Austens did not socialize with gentry and entertained only when family visited. Okay, so they were really, kind of locked down. Her niece Anna described the family's life in Chawton as a very quiet life, according to our ideas. But they were great readers, and beside the housekeeping, our aunts occupied themselves in working with the poor and in teaching some girl or boy to read or write. Okay. Published author. Like many women authors of the time, Austen published her books anonymously. At the time, the ideal rules for a woman were as wife as mother, and writing for women was regarded at best a secondary form of activity. A woman who wished to be a full-time writer was felt to be degrading her femininity. So, books by women were usually published anonymously in order to maintain the conceit that the female writer was only publishing as sort of a part-time job. Can you believe this? Wow. I mean, where we are now, it's like a lot of people who are trying desperately to make their lives in a creative career feel bad about having a job and having that be part of their identity. And it's like, I mean, I have different feelings about it, after seeing all sides, after living all sides of this. But this is very interesting to me that back then you didn't want to be a full-time writer. No, that's not what you wanted, because that doesn't look good for you. Surprising. And was not seeking. That's why people would publish under Mrs. and then the name. That's so weird. Oh, not weird. It's just a different time, but it's fascinating to me. That's why they published under Mrs. and then my last name, because it had that feel like, well, my first job is being a wife. And then my first job is my husband. And then after that, in my spare time, I'm writing this book. Because a lot of the writers at the time would adopt a writing name of Mrs. and then their last name. That's what I'm speaking to here. Okay. Let's go back. Let's go back to what we were reading here. A woman who wished to be a full-time writer was felt to be degrading her femininity, so books by women were usually published anonymously in order to maintain the conceit that the female writer was only publishing as a sort of part-time job and was not seeking to become a literary lioness, i.e. a celebrity. Another reason noted is that the novel was still seen as a lesser form of literature at the time compared with poetry. How fascinating. And many female and male authors published novels anonymously, whereas works of poetry by both female and male writers were almost always attributed to the author. Fascinating. During her time at Chawton, Austen published 4 generally well-received novels. Through her brother Henry, the publisher Thomas Egerton agreed to publish Sense and Sensibility, which, like all of Austen's novels except Pride and Prejudice, was published on commission, that is, at the author's financial risk. When publishing on commission, publishers would advance the costs of publication, repay themselves as books were sold, and then charge a 10% commission on each book sold, paying the rest to the author. If a novel did not recover its costs through sales, the author was responsible for them. The alternative to selling via commission was by selling the copyright. Oh, okay. So this is like licensing, kind of. Let me read that again. When publishing on commission, publishers would advance the cost of publication, repay themselves as books were sold, and then charge 10% commission for each book sold. Yeah. Basically, more or less, that's like licensing. I used to do art licensing. I still do a little bit, but that's similar. And then what you can do as an artist, if I'm putting the way they published writers in the 17 and 1800s against the way that artists do art licensing now, I would say the on commission model is a licensing model, and the selling copyright model is the buying outright model. So some artists will sell their art outright, like sell all rights to the art, and then some of them will license it. So then if you license it, you get to keep the copyright and all that. You're kind of, in a sense, you're renting it, in a sense. I mean, that's not really, but it's similar. Okay. If a novel did not recover its... Okay, we read that part. Austen's experience... Oh, wait a minute. The alternative to selling via commission was selling the copyright, where the author received a one-time payment from the publisher of the manuscript, which occurred with Pride and Prejudice. Austen's experience with Susan, the manuscript that became Northanger Abbey, where she sold the copyright to the publisher Crosby and Sons for 10, who did not publish the book, forcing her to buy the book back in order to get her work published, left Austen leery of this method of publishing. The final alternative of selling by subscription, where a group of people would agree to buy a book in advance, was not an option for Austen, as only authors who were well-known or had influential aristocratic patron who would recommend an up-and-coming book to their friends could sell by subscription. Sense and Sensibility appeared in October 1811 and was described as being written, quote-unquote, by a lady. As it was sold on commission, Egerton used expensive paper and the set price at 15 shillings, equivalent to 69 euro? I think that's euro. In 2023. This is euro, right? That, I think. If I am not mistaken, I can very well be mistaken. Reviews were favorable, and the novel became fashionable among young aristocratic opinion makers. The edition sold out by mid-1813. Austen's novels were published in larger editions than was normal for this period. That's great. Well, okay, smashing success. The small size of the novel reading public and the large costs associated with hand production, particularly the cost of handmade paper, meant that most novels were published in editions of 500 copies or fewer to reduce the risks to the publisher and the novelist. Even some of the most successful titles during this period were issued in editions of not more than 750 or 800 copies and later reprinted if demand continued. Austen novels were published in larger editions, ranging from about 750 copies of Sense and Sensibility to about 2,000 copies of Emma. It is not clear whether the decision to print more copies than usual of Austen's novels was driven by the publishers or the author. Since all but one of Austen's books were originally published on commission, the risks of overproduction were largely hers or Cassandra's after her death, and publishers may have been more willing to produce larger editions than was normal practice when their own funds were at risk. So... okay. So because they knew that they were going to get payback from her for stuff that didn't sell, that's what it sounds like. We don't know whether or not they were a little like why she got larger press runs or not. Does that make sense? I'm confused. That's what I think. I think because they felt like they were going to be covered on the back end if they didn't sell. We're not sure whether they were just more confident and getting more confident about her selling more books, and that's why they had a larger press run, or because they knew. Probably a little bit of both. I don't know though. Austen made €140, equivalent to 12,800 euro in 2023 from Sense and Sensibility, which provided her with some financial and psychological independence. After the success of Sense and Sensibility, all of Austen's subsequent books were billed as written by the author of Sense and Sensibility, and Austen's name never appeared on her books during her lifetime. Wow. Egerton then published Pride and Prejudice, a revision of First Impressions, in January 1813. Austen sold the copyright to Pride and Prejudice to Egerton for €110, equivalent to excuse me, €9,100 in 2023. To maximize profits, he used cheap paper and set the price at 18 shillings. He advertised the book widely, and it was an immediate success, garnering 3 favorable reviews and selling well. Had Austen sold Pride and Prejudice on commission, she would have made a profit of €475, or twice her father's annual income. By October 1813, Egerton was able to begin selling a second edition. Mansfield Park, that's so sad though. Mansfield Park was published by Egerton in May 1814. While Mansfield Park was ignored by reviewers, it was very popular with readers. All copies were sold within 6 months, and Austen's earnings on this novel were larger than for any of her other novels. Yeah, because she sold the rights to Pride and Prejudice. Yikes. Without Austen's knowledge or approval, her novels were translated into French and published in cheaply produced, pirated editions in France. The literary critic, I bet she didn't have say on the ones that she sold the copyright to, though. You know, because you're just giving up all rights then when you do that. The literary critic Noel King commented in 1953 that, given the prevailing rage in France at the time for lush romantic fantasies, it was remarkable that her novels, with the emphasis on everyday English life, had any sort of market in France. King cautioned that Austen, chief translator in France, Madame Isabelle de Monteleu, had only the most rudimentary knowledge of English, and her translations were more of imitations than translations proper, as Monteleu depended upon assistants to provide a summary, which she then translated into an embellished French that often radically altered Austen's plots and characters. The first of the Austen novels to be published that credited her as the author was in France, when Persuasion was published in 1821 as La Famille Elliot ou L'ancienne Inclination. Okay, we might as well just finish reading this because we're almost at illness and death. So let's do it. Austen learned that the Prince Regent admired her novels and kept a set at each of his residences. In November 1815, the Prince Regent's librarian, James Stanyer Clark, invited Austen to visit the prince's London residence and hinted Austen should dedicate the forthcoming Emma to the prince. Though Austen disapproved of the Prince Regent, she could scarcely refuse their request. Austen disapproved of the Prince Regent on account of his womanizing, gambling, drinking, spendthrift ways, and generally disreputable behavior. So he was a cad, everybody. He was a cad. She later wrote Plan of a Novel, according to hints from various quarters, a satiric outline of the perfect novel based on the librarian's many suggestions for a future Austen novel. So now she's making fun of people who were telling her what to write. Good. Austen was greatly annoyed by Clark's often pompous literary advice, and the plan of a novel parodying Clark was intended as her revenge for all the unwanted letters she had received from the royal librarian. In mid-1815, Austen moved her work from Egerton to John Murray, a better-known publisher in London, who published Emma in December 1815 and a second edition of Mansfield Park in February 1816. Emma sold well, but the new edition of Mansfield Park did poorly, and this failure offset most of the income from Emma. Ugh. Oh, that's terrible. These were the last of Austen's novels to be published during her lifetime. I feel like I'm getting a really good sense of her life and her challenges through this, reading this Wikipedia. While Murray prepared Emma for publication, Austen began The Elliots, later published as Persuasion. She completed her first draft in 1816. In addition, shortly after the publication of Emma, Henry Austen repurchased the copyright for Susan from Crosby. Austen was forced to postpone publishing either of these completed novels by family financial troubles. She didn't have the dough. Henry Austen's bank failed in March 1816, depriving him of all his assets, leaving him deeply in debt and costing Edward James and Frank Austen large sums. Henry and Frank could no longer afford the contributions they had made to support their mother and sisters. Oh my gosh. Austen was feeling unwell by early 1816. We're going into her illness and death now. Austen was feeling unwell by early 1816, but ignored the warning signs. By the middle of that year, her decline was unmistakable. She began a slow, irregular deterioration. The majority of biographers rely on Zachary Cope's 1964 retrospective diagnosis and list her cause of death as Addison's disease, although her final illness had also been described as resulting from Hodgkin's lymphoma. When her uncle died and left his entire fortune to his wife, effectively disinheriting his relatives, she suffered a relapse, writing, "I am ashamed to say that the shock of my uncle's will brought on a relapse, but a weak body must excuse weak nerves." Oh my gosh. Austen continued to work in spite of her illness. Dissatisfied with the ending of the Elliots, she rewrote the final two chapters, which she finished on August 6, 1816. In January 1817, Austen began The Brothers, titled Sanditon, when published in 1925, completing 12 chapters before stopping work in mid-March 1817, probably due to illness. Todd describes Sanditon's heroine, Diana Parker, Diana, what a great name, as an energetic invalid. In the novel, Austen mocked hypochondriacs, and although she describes the heroine as bilious, 5 days after abandoning the novel, she wrote of herself that she was turning every wrong color and living chiefly on the sofa. She put down her pen on 18 March 1817, making a note of it. So she made an actual note of the day that she stopped writing. Austen made light of her condition, describing it as bile and rheumatism. As her illness progressed, she experienced difficulty walking and lacked energy. By mid-April, she was confined to bed. In May, Cassandra and Henry brought her to Winchester for treatment, by which time she suffered agonizing pain and welcomed death. Austen died in Winchester, July 1817, at the age of 41. Henry, through his clerical connections, arranged for his sister to be buried in the north aisle of the nave of Winchester Cathedral. So he pulled some strings for her. The epitaph, composed by her brother James, praises Austen's personal qualities, expresses hope for her salvation, and mentions the extraordinary endowments of her mind, but does not explicitly mention her achievements as a writer. Posthumous publication. In the months after Austen's death in July 1817, Henry Austen and Murray arranged for the publication of Persuasion and Northanger Abbey as a set. That's an interesting set. Henry Austen contributed a biographical note dated December 1817, which for the first time identified his sister as the author of the novels. Tomlin described it as a loving and polished eulogy. Sales were good for a year. Only 321 copies remained unsold at the end of 1818. Although Austen's 6 novels were out of print in England in the 1820s, they were still being read through copies housed in private libraries and circulating libraries. Austen had early admirers. The first piece of fiction using her as a character, what might now be called real person's fiction, appeared in 1823 in a letter to the editor of in the Ladies' Magazine. It refers to Austen's genius and suggests that aspiring authors were envious of her powers. In 1832, Richard Bentley purchased the remaining copyrights to all of her novels, over the following winter published 5 illustrated volumes as part of his standard novels series. In October 1833, Bentley released the first collected edition of her works. Since then, Austen's novels have been continuously in print. Okay, let's see. Let us... I just want to see if we can see anything about Northanger Abbey. There's a lot more here that's really interesting to read. That is very good to learn about. But I'm going to go to her art now. We're going to go to a quote. We're going to go to a quote. We're going to draw a quote. We're going to do this. And it's going to be this quote. Because I thought this was a cute one. It's actually from Northanger Abbey, but that wasn't necessarily by design. I just liked it. I have this book here. I just want to do a book. I want to do it on a book cover, like an old-timey book cover. So I'm going to write the quote down here, just on a piece of paper. The person, be it gentleman or lady, who has not pleasure in a good novel must be intolerably stupid. Let's go to, I want to go to LibriVox and just see if we can listen to a little Jane Austen. Because why not?
Chapter 8 of Memoir of Jane Austen. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Leanne Howard. Memoir of Jane Austen by James Edward Austen Lee. Chapter 8. Slow growth of her fame, ill success of first attempts at publication, 2 reviews of her works contrasted. Seldom has any literary reputation been of such slow growth as that of Jane Austen. Readers of the present day know the rank that is generally assigned to her. They have been told by Archbishop Whately in his review of her works, and by Lord Macaulay in his review of Madame d'Arblay's, the reason why the highest place is to be awarded to Jane Austen as a truthful drawer of character, and why she is to be classed with those who have approached nearest in that respect to the great master Shakespeare. They see her safely placed by such authorities in her niche, not indeed amongst the highest orders of genius, but in one confessedly her own, and our British temple of literary fame, and it may be difficult to make them believe how coldly her works were first received, and how few readers had any appreciation of their peculiar...
Right? What is genius anyway? Who's to say? I guess people didn't think she was a genius? I don't know. I don't know about that. You know? I mean, easy for them to say. Right? What are they talking about? All right, let's go back.
Sometimes a friend or neighbor, who chanced to know of our connection with the author, would condescend to speak with moderate approbation of Sense and Sensibility or Pride and Prejudice. But if they had known that we, in our secret thoughts, classed her with Madame d'Arblay or Miss Edgeworth, or even with some other novel writers of the day, whose names are now scarcely remembered, they would have considered it an amusing instance of family conceit. To the multitude, her works appeared tame and commonplace, poor in coloring, and sadly deficient in incident and interest. It is true that we were sometimes cheered by hearing that a different verdict had been pronounced by more competent judges. We were told how some great statesman or distinguished poet held these works in high estimation. We had the satisfaction of believing that they were most admired by the best judges, and comforted ourselves with Horace's satis est equitem mihi plaudere. So much was this the case, that one of the ablest men of my acquaintance said, in that kind of jest which is made earnest in it, that he had established it in his own mind as a new test of ability, whether people could or could not appreciate Miss Austen's merits. But though such golden opinions were now and then gathered in, yet the wide field of public taste yielded no adequate return either in praise or profit. Her reward was not to be the quick return of the cornfield, but the slow growth of the tree which is to endure to another generation. Her first attempts at publication were very discouraging. In November 1797, her father wrote the following letter to Mr. Cadell. Sir, I have in my possession a manuscript novel comprising 3 volumes about the length of Miss Burney's Evelina. As I am well aware of what consequence it is that a work of this sort should make its first appearance under a respectable name, I apply to you. I shall be much obliged, therefore, if you will inform me whether you choose to be concerned in it, what will be the expense of publishing it at the author's risk, and what you will venture to advance for the property of it, if on perusal it is approved of. Should you give any encouragement, I will send you the work. I am, sir, your humble servant, George Austen, Steventon, near Overton, Hants, 1st November, 1797. This proposal was declined by return of post. The work thus summarily rejected must have been Pride and Prejudice. The fate of Northanger Abbey was still more humiliating. It was sold in 1803 to a publisher in Bath for £10, but it found so little favor in his eyes that he chose to abide by his first loss rather than risk farther expense by publishing such a work. It seems to have lain for many years unnoticed in his drawers, somewhat as the first chapters of Waverley lurked forgotten amongst the old fishing tackle in Scott's cabinet. Tilneys, Thorpes, and Morelands consigned apparently to eternal oblivion. But when 4 novels of steadily increasing success had given the writer some confidence in herself, she wished to recover the copyright of this early work. One of her brothers undertook the negotiation. He found the purchaser very willing to receive back his money and to resign all claim to the copyright. When the bargain was concluded and the money paid, but not till then, the negotiator had the satisfaction of informing him that the work which had been so lightly esteemed was by the author of Pride and Prejudice. I do not think that she was herself much mortified by the want of early success. She wrote for her own amusement. Money, though acceptable, was not necessary for the moderate expenses of her quiet home. Above all, she was blessed with a cheerful, contented disposition and a humble mind, and so lowly did she esteem her own claims that when she received £150 from the sale of Sense and Sensibility, she considered it a prodigious recompense for that which had cost her nothing. It cannot be supposed, however, that she was altogether insensible to the superiority of her own workmanship over that of some contemporaries who were then enjoying a brief popularity. Indeed, a few touches in the following extracts from 2 of her letters show that she was as quick-sighted to absurdities in composition as to those in living persons. Mr. C's opinion has gone down in my list, but as my paper relates only to Mansfield Park, I may fortunately excuse myself from entering Mr. D's. I will redeem my credit with him by writing a close imitation of self-control as soon as I can. I will improve upon it. My heroine shall not only be wafted down an American river in a boat by herself, she shall cross the Atlantic in the same way and never stop till she reaches Gravesend. We have got Roseanne in our society and find it much as you describe it, very good and clever, but tedious. Mrs. Hawkins' great excellence is on serious subjects. There are some very delightful conversations and reflections on religion, but on lighter topics I think she falls into many absurdities, and as to love, her heroine has very comical feelings. There are 1,000 improbabilities in the story. Do you remember the two Miss Ormstons introduced just at last? Very flat and unnatural. Mademoiselle Quissart is rather my passion. 2 notices of her works appeared in the Quarterly Review, one in October 1815, and another more than 3 years after her death, in January 1821. The latter article is known to have been from the pen of Whately, afterwards Archbishop of Dublin. They differ much from each other in the degree of praise which they award, and I think also it may be said, in the ability with which they are written. The first bestows some approval, but the other expresses the warmest admiration. One can scarcely be satisfied with the critical acumen of the former writer, who, in treating of Sense and Sensibility, takes no notice whatever of the vigor with which many of the characters are drawn, but declares that the interest and merit of the piece depends altogether upon the behavior of the elder sister. Nor is he fair when, in Pride and Prejudice, he represents Elizabeth's change of sentiments towards Darcy as caused by the sight of his house and grounds. But the chief discrepancy between the 2 reviewers is to be found in their appreciation of the commonplace and silly characters to be found in these novels. On this point, the difference almost amounts to a contradiction, such as one sometimes sees drawn up in parallel columns when it is desired to convict some writer or some statesman of inconsistency. The reviewer in 1815 says, "The faults of these works arise from the minute detail which the author's plan comprehends. Characters of folly or simplicity, such as those of old Woodhouse and Miss Bates, are ridiculous when first presented, but if too often brought forward or too long dwelt on, their prosing is apt to become as tiresome in fiction as in real society." The reviewer, in 1821, on the contrary, singles out the fools as especial instances of the writer's abilities and declares that in this respect she shows a regard to character hardly exceeded by Shakespeare himself. These are his words: "Like him, Shakespeare, she shows as admirable a discrimination in the character of fools as of people of sense, a merit which is far from common. To invent, indeed, a conversation full of wisdom or of wit requires that the writer should himself possess ability. But the converse does not hold good. It is no fool that can describe fools well, and many who have succeeded pretty well in painting superior characters have failed in giving individuality to those weaker ones, which it is necessary to introduce in order to give a faithful representation of real life. They exhibit to us mere folly in the abstract, forgetting that to the eye of the skillful naturalist the insects on a leaf present as wide differences as exist between the lion and the elephant. Slender and shallow and egg-cheek, as Shakespeare has painted them, though equally fools, resemble one another no more than Richard and Macbeth and Julius Caesar, and Miss Austen's Mrs. Bennet, Mr. Rushworth, and Miss Bates are no more alike than her Darcy, Knightley, and Edmund Bertram. Some have complained, indeed, of finding her fools too much like nature and consequently tiresome. There is no disputing about tastes. All we can say is that such critics must, whatever deference they may outwardly pay to received opinions, find the Merry Wives of Windsor and Twelfth Night very tiresome, and that those who look with pleasure at Wilkie's pictures, or those of the Dutch school, must admit that excellence of imitation may confer attraction on that which would be insipid or disagreeable in the reality. Her minuteness of detail has also been found fault with, but even where it produces, at the time, a degree of tediousness, we know not whether that can justly be reckoned a blemish, which is absolutely essential to a very high excellence. Now, it is absolutely impossible, without this, to produce that thorough acquaintance with the characters which is necessary to make the reader heartily interested in them. Let anyone cut out from the Iliad or from Shakespeare's plays everything, we are far from saying that either might not lose some parts with advantage, but let him reject everything, which is absolutely devoid of importance and interest, and he will find that what is left will have lost more than half its charms. We are convinced that some writers have diminished the effect of their works by being scrupulous to admit nothing into them which had not some absolute and independent merit. They have acted like those who strip off the leaves of a fruit tree, as being of themselves good for nothing, with the view of securing more nourishment to the fruit, which in fact cannot attain its full maturity and flavor without them. The world, I think, has endorsed the opinion of the later writer, but it would not be fair to set down the discrepancy between the two entirely to the discredit of the former. The fact is that in the course of the intervening 5 years, these works have been read and reread by many leaders in the literary world. The public taste was forming itself all this time and grew by what it fed on. These novels belong to a class which gain rather than lose by frequent perusals, and it is probable that each reviewer represented fairly enough the prevailing opinions of readers in the year when each wrote. Since that time, the testimonies in favor of Jane Austen's works have been continual and almost unanimous. They are frequently referred to as models, nor have they lost their first distinction of being especially acceptable to minds of the highest order. I shall indulge myself by collecting into the next chapter instances of the homage paid to her by such persons. End of Chapter 8. Recording by Leanne Howlett.
I think I have to change the chapter. It was kind of fun to listen to. I will put the next chapter on in a minute. That's really pretty right there. I like it. I feel a little sad about Jane. She had a rough life. I didn't know anything about her life, but I have to say, now that I do, I really do feel bad for her. I mean, not bad for her. Well, yeah, okay, bad for her. I feel like she got a real rough shake, you know? She definitely got a rough shake. She had a rough one.
Chapter 9 of Memoir of Jane Austen. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Gemma Blythe. Memoir of Jane Austen by James Edward Austen Lee. Chapter 9. Opinions expressed by eminent persons. Opinions of others of less eminence. Opinion of American readers. Into this list of the admirers of my aunt's works, I admit those only whose eminence will be universally acknowledged. No doubt the number might have been increased. Southey, in a letter to Sir Egerton Bridges, says, "You mention Miss Austen. Her novels are more true to nature, and have, for my sympathies, passages of finer feeling than any others of this age. She was a person of whom I have heard so well and think so highly, that I regret not having had an opportunity of testifying to her the respect which I felt for her." It may be observed that Southey had probably heard from his own family connections of the charm of her private character. A friend of hers, the daughter of Mr. Big Wither of Many Down Park near Basingstoke, was married to Southey's uncle, the Reverend Herbert Hill, who had been useful to his nephew in many ways, and especially in supplying him with the means of attaining his extensive knowledge of Spanish and Portuguese literature. Mr. Hill had been chaplain to the British, where Southey visited him and had the use of a library in those languages which his uncle had collected. Southey himself continually mentions his Uncle Hill in terms of respect and gratitude. S.T. Coleridge would sometimes burst out into high encomiums of Miss Austen's novels as being, in their way, perfectly genuine and individual productions. I remember Miss Mitford saying to me, I would almost cut off one of my hands if it would enable me to write like your aunt with the other. The biographer of Sir J. Mackintosh says, something recalled to his mind the traits of character which are so delicately touched in Miss Austen's novels. He said that there was genius in sketching out that new kind of novel. He was vexed for the credit of the Edinburgh Review, that it had left her unnoticed. The Quarterly had done her more justice. It was impossible for a foreigner to understand fully the merit of her works. Madame de Stael, to whom he had recommended one of her novels, found no interest in it, and in her note to him, in reply, said it was vulgar. And yet, he said, nothing could be more true than what he wrote in answer. There is no book which that word would so little suit. Every village could furnish matter for a novel to Miss Austen. She did not need the common materials for a novel, strong emotions or strong incidents. It was not, however, quite impossible for a foreigner to appreciate these works. For Monsieur Guizot writes thus, I am a great novel reader, and I seldom read German or French novels. The characters are too artificial. My delight is to read English novels, particularly those written by women. C'est tout un quai de drôle. Miss Austen, Miss Ferrier, etc., from a school which, in the excellence and profusion of its productions, resembles the cloud of dramatic poets of the great Athenian age. In the Keepsake of 1825, the following lines appeared, written by Lord Morpeth, afterwards 7th Earl of Carlisle and Lord Lieutenant of Ireland, accompanying an illustration of a lady reading a novel. Beats thy quick pulse o'er Inchbald's thrilling leaf, Brunton's high moral, Opie's deep-wrought grief. Has the mild chaperone claimed thy yielding heart, Gerald's dark page, Trevelyan's gentle art? Or is it thou, all-perfect Austen? Here let one poor wreath adorn thy early pair, that scarce allow thy modest youth to claim its living portion of thy certain fame. Oh, Mrs. Bennet, Mrs. Norris, too, while memory survives will dream of you. And Mr. Woodhouse, whose abstemious lip must thin, but not too thin, his gruel sip. Miss Bates, our idol, though the village bore, and Mrs. Elton, ardent to explore, while the clear style flows on without pretense, with unstained purity and unmatched sense. Or if a sister e'er approach the throne, she called the rich inheritance her own. The admiration felt by Lord Macaulay would probably have taken a very practical form if his life had been prolonged. I have the authority of his sister, Lady Trevelyan, for stating that he had intended to undertake the task upon which I have ventured. He purposed to write a memoir of Miss Austen with criticisms of her works, to prefix it to a new edition of her novels, and from the proceeds of the sale to erect a monument to her memory in Winchester Castle. Oh, that such an idea had been realized. That portion of the plan in which Lord Macaulay's success
I think we're good.
most certain might have been almost sufficient
I think
for
we're
his object.
good. Turning off that LibriVox. I think I enjoyed the first narrator more than the last one. Thank you for coming on this journey with me today. And thank you for coming on this journey with me all month so far. I know it's been like a wild ride for me. and I've learned a lot, and I hope you have too, about these authors, about these ladies, and kind of wild. Kind of wild, I have to say. Did not know really anything about Jane Austen before now, like about her life. I feel like I need to internalize and absorb what I have learned today, because I just sad. I think there's a fair amount of sad going on, and learning about these women in this time frames. Oops, sorry. Has really, it helps you learn more about just, it helps you learn more about women, the history of women in general. And it's just like hard, it's quite a lot to, it's a lot. So yeah. I will say, since I've been reading so much on the Wikipedia, like really getting into the history of them and spending like the bulk of my time on the lives doing that, and then spending less time on the art but doing like kind of inky sketches, I've really enjoyed the inky sketches a lot. It's nice to approach the art I'm doing on these with, kind of more of a loose and idea style than anything that I'm worried about making finished. Very loose and sketchy, and just sort of like, not at all feeling like it needs to be anything that I'm gonna take outside my sketchbook. You know what I mean? It's just like getting ideas down, which is really fun and freeing. So yeah, I'm just gonna add a little bit of texture to my book cover here, and then we're gonna hang it up. And then I will be back for another, I'll be back tomorrow for another Art Day 27 author, but I will also be back today to do another page of Night Guard and Fairy Cats in Procreate. I will probably come on at about 1, I think, because I was here for so long today. So, and I usually go on at 12:30 p.m. Eastern for that live, but I think I'm going to give myself a little bit more time since it's already noon. So I'll see you at 1 if you're around, and if not, I'll be back tomorrow for day 27 of Inktober. So I will talk to you soon. Bye.